So, just like tell me about what you do, like your process and your materials. Like what is it that you primarily make, and what is it that you primarily use?
Okay. Um, so I started making a web series like I don't know, or I started designing this world back in what 2006 or something, and most everything I make fits into that world kind of. It's all kind of cohesive, and I don't talk about that a lot because I'm always like it's usually for episodes that I never actually release, but I have hours worth of unfinished web series episodes sitting around on my computer. But I like it because it gives me a kind of a mental framework. It means I don't feel like I'm doing tests. It feels as if like I'm expanding a an existing thing. Um, I like the delayed gratification of knowing you've kind of like you've put the energy into something when you work really hard on like an asset or a shot or a short or something. You like and knowing that like I just have that kind of like in my pocket or like sometimes I work on something like maybe just a random Greeble library like little bits of robots or something and I'll just like stick them behind like the dam full of like the kinetic energy of like unfinished projects and that kind of feels good to know that like if I'm ever I can kind of like tap into that and having it all be part of like one project just kind of makes it feel as if like everything is kind of applicable to everything else. I don't know if I'm explaining that particularly well. Um, and so that kind of helps define the aesthetics a little bit too. Is like if I see something that I'm really excited about, then I'm like, oh, how can I combine this thing I'm excited about with this like other stuff? And usually like it's the combination of those two things that lets me kind of like explore something that like I'm really excited about that feels kind of like I don't know. I've geez, I'm articulating that really bad. But
Well, I mean, you definitely have an aesthetic, right? Like the work that you create is very consistent. And I was wondering if you could speak to sort of like how you go about creating sort of like you seem to have like a massive library of assets, right? Um, and I think the way that you go about creating things is a little bit unique. Like you use a lot of images, image as reference, which is what a lot of people do, but you also texture things with images. And so that's sort of what I meant by material is sort of like where do you find these images? What gives you inspiration to create assets and
oh
things?
yeah. Um yeah, finding images as like I've done a couple tutorials kind of showing like, hey, you can just take an image and kind of stick it on a thing. And a couple comments have kind of nailed it on the head where they're like, wait, finding the image is like the hard part. And it's like totally true because like I've been making these robot bits kind of lately, and there's when you're working with metal, there's only like a certain number of ways we can work with metal. We can kind of like we can mill it, or we drill it out, or we stamp it, or we do like a die cast, injection molded thing. And each one has all of these different like tells, like different kind of evidences of the way it's manufactured. And if you can replicate all of those, then you're going to have like a more realistic kind of thing at the end. Um, and so I've been on the hunt for, I'm actually surrounded by them right now. Just little pieces I can take pictures of to get those like aesthetics. Like, look at this
Oh yeah.
die cast bit. This is so good. And there's so many little like you can see where they inject the metal into the mold. You can see the place where like the prongs push it out as opposed to like this where it's just like it's just stamped out.
Hmm.
And so yeah, I take a bunch of the pictures myself, but also there's places online you can find stuff. There's Unsplash, Pixabay are great, like just public domain image resources. There's websites where you can just like somebody will walk through a town and just take pictures of like every sailboat they see, and you can just buy that for like $5 and do whatever with it. And sometimes it's like, you know what, $5 for all the boats I'll ever need. That makes sense. Unfortunately, like I think most people live in fairly homogenous looking towns. Like I know I do. I live in a very boring looking town. And
Yeah.
so occasionally you'll get like the grease trap behind the restaurant that's like oozing in metal and kind of has all these cool textures and oh that's good. But in general it's just the same kind of buildings over and over. And so if you're trying to make anything that doesn't look like your town, it can be a little bit tricky. So yeah, actually, what's really cool, people have been lately. I've been posting kind of my texture library around, because I take pictures of electrical boxes and little warning signs and things, and just kind of stick it into a folder that's a resource. And I made that available, and then I had other people start sending me like ones from their towns too, and so it was becoming this kind of like broader thing of like, oh, there's all of these different just little bits from all these different towns available. I'd love to figure out how to make something like that like more official, just so that like, because I don't know, I feel like so many people have their own individual texture libraries, and it would just be such a cool resource if that were like everybody were sharing with everybody else.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure. I mean, like, and that's one of the things that I love about Blender so much and using Blender is that like there's such a great community, and people are so willing to share or have a video call with a complete stranger. Like it's just a part of my thesis is about accessibility and like letting people access the tools for free or open source or both. Um, and I think that's really important that artists can sort of like get things affordably or for free and things like that. And you create an insane amount of content, like on YouTube for free or on your Patreon, which is paid. How do you sort of balance your sort of like accessible work that's open to a wider audience and also making a living?
that's a very new question. Also, I want to hear more about this thesis in a sec. But
Mhm.
yeah, that's a question I'm just having to figure out now, because I never really monetized anything before. I was putting stuff up on YouTube. In fact, nobody even I had like what, like 1,000 follower, like 600 followers on YouTube as of like a year and a half ago or something. And
Wow.
so this whole like anybody paying any attention to anything I'm doing is a fairly new thing, and that's been kind of wild. Um, like back in February, there was a YouTube comment that was like, if you haven't monetized any of this, you're an idiot. And so I was like, okay. Well, let's do that. So I figured I had to turn on the ads from YouTube, and I started the Patreon, which has been very creatively fulfilling too. That's been a very very cool zone, and it's kind of meant that like I've been able to, because it used to be like 60% of my time was just working on random music videos and stuff, where you're kind of at the whims of like whatever they feel like making. Um,
Mhm.
and usually, if we're honest, like we there's a bazillion music videos that are made. A lot of music videos are just trying to remake some other music video that like somebody kind of saw before, and it's really rare you get to work on a project where it's like everything's kind of firing on every cylinder, and you're like, oh, this is kind of cool. And so a lot of times it felt like I was just kind of like stopping to like work on a thing, and like my creative and my like actual living were separate. But yeah, now that this has been, it's actually like paying my bills, being able to just like put experiment and do stuff, and it's been crazy. But yeah, that does mean like now the YouTube side is kind of has kind of slowed down. Every once in a while, I post something to the Patreon, and if people are like excited enough about it, I'm like, ooh, I should figure out how to put that onto YouTube. But if I'm honest, I'm intimidated by YouTube because it's now 300,000 people, and I'm like, that's too many.
Yeah, it's a third of a million people.
I don't know what to do with that many people, and so I'm kind of in like my, because I like some social like anxiety too, and so I'm like, all right, well, I'll just try to make something that's obviously me trying really hard, and then so even if they're like, this isn't useful, but I can tell you really wanted it to be, and I'm like, yes, thank you for loving me. It's a weird dynamic, but the
Yeah.
fact that like, the Patreon was like everybody had to like do a threshold to like get in there means that like I never feel as if I'm imposing myself on anybody by like randomly having an announcement or something. So that was kind of nice. I don't know if
Yeah.
that's what you were asking, but that's some of the
Well, it's part of the question. I mean, like, yeah, like you can definitely make money off these things, which I find very exciting. Um, and I mean, like your YouTube videos, especially like the lazy tutorials, seem so effortless. Um, they're just wonderful, you know, little bite-sized clips. And they're actually like incredibly useful, you know, like if you stop and pause them and you sort of like figure out the mechanics of what you're doing, they can be really incredibly helpful. And I know they're helpful for a lot of people who are intermediate stages in Blender. So I think you talked about having a studio in one of your videos, like it was an abandoned church that you had bought.
Yeah, I'm in it. I'm in it right now.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. Can you tell me a bit about that and how that works?
Yeah, it's it's very messy. We've been doing also it's cold. I don't heat the whole thing all the time just because that gets very expensive. But yeah, I was living in Seattle, and I had this little studio like under the stairs. It was like 5 feet by 4 feet or something. And I had my 3D printer and my little workbench and my computer and everything all just like you couldn't even stand up. It was this tiny little space. And the rent was insane for like this one room. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool to kind of like have a little bit more space to build props and all of that? And it turns out if you move an hour and a half outside of the city, like you get a little bit more for your money. And so I live way out in the boonies. Um, actually, so what's cool? Seattle is it's in a sound. There's like all of these islands and waterways and stuff. And so as the crow flies, I'm fairly close to like downtown Seattle. But as the car drives, you have to drive through like 3 other cities to get there.
Mm.
And so I'm like 90 miles away if you have to drive. But they just added like a little fast ferry, or they're adding a little like rocket ferry that just goes between my place and downtown, which means it's like, I don't know, it's very rare that you live somewhere and suddenly you find out that it's like, hey, instead of 2 hours from downtown, you're 20 minutes from downtown.
Yeah,
And
that's
so
pretty
that's
incredible.
that's very exciting. But yeah, it's just kind of been I was trying to future proof a little bit of like the idea of, I don't know, I always had the dream of being able to build a set and leave the set up for a while and kind of make like I don't know, build like a spaceship or something like that, and just like make a series about people living in a spaceship or something like that.
Mhm.
And there's enough room in the main church space to kind of to build a virtual production stuff and hang up green screens and build sets. And sometimes it's like, I wish I lived a little bit closer to everybody I knew, but other times but usually it's just like, oh, we can build whatever we want. This is really cool. So that's kind of the trade-off with that.
Yeah, I mean, I live in the middle of absolutely nowhere either. Um, but my parents have this old barn,
Mhm.
and they don't keep animals anymore since my sister and I moved out when we were teenagers. And so I just have like this massive space that I can just like build installations and you know, put up green screens and put up
Oh,
projection
cool.
screens, and it's absolutely a benefit of living out here is just having so much space to sort of make whatever I want. And then also like all of the junk that's in the back, you know, I can use any of that to sort of, you know, throw stuff together, and that's been really cool.
That's very cool. What
Mhm.
what type of stuff do you make?
Um, well, I mean, I'm going to school for it's called Integrated Digital Technologies,
Okay.
and it's an arts program. So like I design and I build sort of like gallery installations um, using like cutting edge technology.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
yeah, so lots of like last semester I made an instrument that you can control with your hands, and that also controlled parts of the installation, and you sort of like walked through it and sort of like heard your body making music based on like where you are and where you're looking, and then there was a bunch of projection stuff at the same time. And
Was it like body scanning stuff or?
yeah, I was using a bunch of Connects, like Xbox
Oh, that's
Connects.
cool. That's very cool.
Yeah, it was super fun.
So,
Hmm.
so your thesis this year, is it another project or?
Yeah, it's a year-long project. Well, 8 months. Um, and I'm doing sort of like a virtual production thing. Um, but bringing it back to that like accessibility level is that like we pretty much all have these tools in our pockets to sort of like
Yeah.
make it possible. Like, and so I'm sort of trying to create like a workflow that includes Blender and Eevee to sort of make that happen.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
I've been trying to do that. I mean, I think honestly, like the Unreal Engine is like they've just been dumping resources into being like the go-to for
Yeah.
that. And so I'm kind of going like, should I just try to learn Unreal? It's like the tool, but also it's so like Eevee does such cool stuff in real time,
Yeah.
and like all the tools are almost there that I'd love to see that working. And I feel like it just needs like one developer to kind of make it like their project.
Yeah.
I know people have already made tools for getting like the Vive controller data into Blender, and
Oh
so
yeah,
you
that's no
could,
problem.
yeah. Have you already messed around with stuff like that?
I mean, I'm trying to spend like the least amount of money in building this project, which is why I'm using like an iPhone because I already own one.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, like a Vive controller would be the exact same thing, or pretty close to the same thing. Um, and I mean, I already have it working. Like there's a green screen back here,
Yeah.
um, and I'm able to track my iPhone and also take the camera feed from the iPhone and get it all sent over Wi-Fi to my laptop,
Really?
and then use that to composite the EV 3D scene behind me. So like as I'm filming myself or filming anything, it's actually me in the space that EV is rendering. And I mean,
Really?
once you match up the lighting and stuff like that, I'm sure it would look, you know, pretty good. I'm about to move this whole setup into the barn so I can start doing like, you know, larger scale sort of like filming projects.
Are you doing like the live keying too?
Yeah.
Really? How are you doing that?
I'm doing that. Um, I mean, like ideally, I want to do it all inside of Blender.
Yeah.
So like I'm talking to some developers about like, you know, how do we stream a webcam feed directly into Blender Eevee and get it to run in real time? And that seems to be a pretty complicated problem. Um, so right now I'm using OBS Studio, which is just like this. Do you know what it is? Like just this open
Yeah.
source video streaming tool.
I've heard you can do keying. I haven't played around with that at all, but I really should. Um, yeah, if you Google how to do like Blender keying, all you find is like that 12-year-old like article talking about how to do it in like the game engine,
Yeah.
and it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Um, well, that's very exciting. And how well does the iPhone track?
It works phenomenally well.
Really?
Um, yeah, I was actually a little bit surprised by how well it worked. I'll send you a link to a video that I just made where I have in this living room here. I have like a camera with my iPhone mounted to it, and then the live camera the live camera feed is being fed into the computer, and then
Hmm.
above that is the EV viewport of a photogrammetry model of this room. And
Oh,
so the point of that was that like so the live camera feed should match up exactly with the viewport, right? And it did, and it worked amazingly. And so like I know that it works.
I want to see that so bad. That's so cool.
Yeah, it's really
Um,
exciting.
we have what blows my mind is we have so many different tools kind of going on. Like there's the cameras that can create 3D models in like real time as you just like scan them around a room. We
Yeah,
have the accelerometers on phones that know where they're going. We have cameras that can automatic, or we have AI that can extract depth passes automatically, so you don't need to use keying. We have AI based tracking, and they're all these kind of separate tools. I've seen AI that can relight stuff if you give it like an HDRI and like a source video. They can relight the video as if there were we're
oh,
in
that's
that
cool.
HDRI lighting condition. And I'm like, man, if all of this came together, so you just had like the motion data as metadata from the camera along with like some sort of depth pass with an AI relighting pass, you could film anybody anywhere and just
Yeah,
drag and drop in different environments. And we
yeah,
have all of that technology. It just has to like come together. And so I'm trying to like, sometimes it's fun to think like, all right, what could this be in like 5 years? And I feel like yeah, we're just gonna need I don't know, the AI's ability to auto generate environments, like where you can just plug an image in. They're getting really good at just like extrapolating all of the like, you show it a picture of a person, like just a picture, and it gives you back the 3D model. You probably saw like the test they were doing
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah.
They'll probably have that for environments and stuff too. But I'm
Yeah.
just
I'm
trying to think
super
like
excited about that. That would be amazing.
that would be it's ridiculous. I'm trying to think like, yeah, right, in 5 years, what would be left for like us to do? Um, Fortunately, like all the parts they're replacing first, like keying and tracking and all of that, are the parts that like I didn't want to do anyways,
Yeah.
and so it's good. But like, what happens when they come for the creative stuff?
I don't know. I still think, well, I still think obviously a human needs to be involved. Um, I don't know, but who cares if computers become creative? We'll be creative doing something else. Like, I don't know, we'll become chefs or something.
I think that's true. I think there's when Blender went from how old are you?
I'm 23.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, back in like 2011, 2012, Blender released Cycles. Were you using Blender back then?
No, I've only been using Blender for like 2 years. So I started when 2.81 came out.
Okay. Oh wow,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
So back then, it was all just like ray traced. It was just like they'd calculate the light, but the light didn't bounce. And so if you wanted to have a bounce light, you had to set up another little light like where the sunbeam was, so that like the sun would come through the window, and you put your little additional point light so it would like that bounce would radiate. And I had all of these tools for like these tricks for that workflow. And so then when Cycles came out and they were like, no, 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 you just set up the sunlight and it just bounces around. I was like, but what about my skill set? That's this seems horrible. And and I kind of had to like check myself a little bit of like, no, no, that's what technology is just going to keep doing for like forever, is invalidating all of the difficult ways you've learned of doing stuff. And you just kind of have to be happy about it and learn how to like stay in touch. Um, I'm glad I did, because I drug my heels, but Cycles is ridiculous, especially all the new optics denoising stuff. The fact that you can like actually just work in real time in Cycles and it can
Cycles,
just
yeah.
keep up. It's bonkers.
Yeah, it is. It's super exciting. Yeah, no, I just get super excited about Blender and what's coming down the pipeline. I mean, like I've never tracked footage in my life. Like I come from a photography background. Like I started my degree in photography, so I've never had to track green screen footage or anything like that. Like I have no experience with visual effects, but now I can I can record the position data from my phone, the position and rotation data, and then I have that virtual camera saved on my computer with my exact camera motion. I don't even need to track it. I just need to key it, and that's a lot easier.
Oh,
Yeah.
I want to see. So I would imagine, speaking completely out of ignorance, but I would imagine like the rotation, all of that stuff is pretty good. But like, how is it in terms of like moving around in 3D space?
It's pretty accurate. I would say like within like 5 to 10 centimeters
Really?
of accuracy. Yeah. And I mean, there's a few sort of like gotchas, because like the way that the AR kit works in the iPhone is that it finds feature points, like points of high contrast, like the same with like actual tracking, right? Like you have to find a point of
Yeah.
contrast so you can track it. But it's doing that hundreds and hundreds of times every frame, and then tracking the points that like it's able to track, and then from that it's able to calculate its position. And so
So
like,
if you're filling up like too much of the frame or something,
pardon me.
oh, maybe not. Oh, so but if it doesn't like try to track like people or something if they're filling up too much of the frame?
I don't know. I mean, like, I haven't run into any problems with it. Like, even using it with the green screen, you'd think, oh, it doesn't have anything to track because it's a solid green object. But it still
Yeah.
worked fine, right? And so I'm still sort of
Oh,
like
cool.
testing the limitations of it. But so far, like, it's even if I have my finger over the camera, I think it tries to interpolate the accelerometer data, and still sort of
Yeah.
like guess at its location, because yeah,
Oh,
even
that's
with
so
the
cool.
yeah, yeah, it works really well, and especially with the new iPhone coming out with lidar, like it's just going to get 10 times better. Like it'll probably be millimeter accuracy.
Jeez Louise. Yeah, between that and like the different the facial mocap, like I've got a mocap suit, and if you have an iPhone, you can just set up in front of your face and it'll do facial tracking combined with like all the rest of it, and like
Hmm.
different facial scanning and different things. I'm like, I need to get an iPhone just for like this new workflow, basically.
Yeah,
Like,
Apple's pushing AR pretty hard.
yeah, and Android, you're not keeping up. So I might have to jump over, because like I don't know. I don't think I could do. I feel like, yeah, iPhones are definitely leading the race in that one.
Hmm. Yeah, well, if you do, I'd love to help you set up some of these virtual production tools. You know, I'm sure they'd
Oh,
be
I would
in some way.
I would love that. I'm trying to figure out right now, um, because I've got the space, and if I'm honest, I haven't used it for as much as I expected. I was like, oh, we'll all hang out and we'll build all of these big sets and it'll be great. And it turns out if you move like an hour and a half outside of the city, people don't want to hang out all the time, which makes sense. But it does mean that like I'm looking at this space going, I kind of want to turn this into some sort of like virtual production type setup. And I'm going, should I do green screen? Should I do a mix of like green screens and projectors for like the idea of plugging an HDRI into like a thing and projecting that off of a wall, so you get like the correctly colored bounce light or something like that.
Hmm.
Different things playing with. The Mandalorian setup is obviously just bonkers,
Yeah, just
but
$15 million.
is that how much it costs?
Yeah,
Because people were talking about because that's what I assumed. I was like, oh wow, this is amazing, but totally inaccessible to like anybody. But people were
absolutely.
talking about like if you have just slightly worse screens, suddenly you can get like a square meter panel for like $300, but it's like it's the type that they have on like the side of casinos and stuff, so where
Yeah,
it's like separated. I'm going, okay, how much do you have to pay before you have something that's just usable if it's out of focus? Like I don't know. I'm wondering if that technology will ever be accessible to people.
well, by the time that it is, they're going to have something even crazier, and then it's not going to be useful
Yeah,
anymore.
that's true.
But no, I think projectors are pretty good. Like the test that you did with like the phone booth with the projection behind it, like that would be like a really cool example for like a little short shot, you know, with not a ton of movement because the projection size is only so big. But I mean, like if you hook that up and you're able to track your camera in real time, at least that the background projection would be moving realistically, right? And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I think projection is possible. I'm also going to play with it a little bit, but the problem is that you have to light your characters usually independent from your background, right? And as
Yeah.
soon as you have a light in the scene with a projector, you're just going to get like a faded projection in the background, unless you have enough projection that it's lighting your person enough. And projectors aren't really that cheap either.
Yeah. I was even getting bounce from the projector. The projection, because the whole space was white, the projection was bouncing off of the wall, hitting the ceiling, and going back to the wall. And
Hmm.
so even just what I found was having brighter scenes. Like I don't know, for some reason I thought you'd want to do it dark and just like project the little points of light. But if you actually project a bright scene and really let the projector like be the dominant light source as it would be, it's obviously a lot more forgiving of the black levels, because
Yeah.
there isn't any like actual black. And so that's maybe a thing I should play around with a little bit more. The one thing I'm trying to figure out, and I maybe you've worked on this too. So if you try to think how to articulate this. If you had a screen projecting into a door, like a projector,
Yeah.
and you're tracking this camera, this is the shot right here, and you have this all going into Blender, and you'd have your virtual camera seeing the same thing, but it's in the Eevee environment.
Hmm.
You don't just project this view onto the door, because then you'd have this entire view also nested in the door. So what you have to do is you have to take just the part in the door and basically like corner pin that. Yeah, are you familiar with After Effects?
Yes, I use Touch Designer, but there's corner pinning in Touch Designer too.
Okay, yeah, you'd have to be corner pinning the door out to fill the entire projection, so that once it's projected into the door, it's the right shape. That makes, yeah. Um, and I have no idea how to do that.
Yeah. Um, I actually have another video I can send you where I did exactly that.
Really?
Yeah, not on the scale of a door, but I have this little screen here that I set up,
Uh-huh.
and this little like tiny little Pico projector here.
Oh yeah.
And what I was doing is I was tracking the position of my camera, right? And then it was rendering that view in Eevee from precisely the location of my iPhone, and then it was projecting that render onto that, so that
Yeah.
when you were filming, that looked like it was like a hallway.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's
I
possible.
would love to see how you did that. That's very cool. Um,
Yeah, it's all the same technology. I mean, like once you have your camera tracked, there's just so many possibilities, you know?
oh, that's
And
cool.
doing it in real time, like yeah, no, there's a million ideas I can think of how to use that, right?
That's cool. So I was thinking if I were doing like a projection method on a back wall, I
Mhm.
wouldn't actually be using any of the rotation data from the camera. Because if like you tilt up, but also like the projection on the back wall tilts up, that's crazy. You want the camera to be tilting up across a stationary projection, you know? Does that make sense?
I don't know.
Um,
I mean, like if you're looking at the projection through your camera and
mhm.
you're tilting the camera up, the projection has to tilt as well. Well, like what's being rendered in the projection needs to tilt as well to make the ground stay flat, right?
Well, if only if the projector were attached to the camera. Like if we had, imagine there's a projector just projecting right onto this door, the door onto the door.
Yeah.
If I tilt up, like the projector doesn't need to do anything because
Oh,
it's
no,
just
no, no.
handling
Yeah, no, it needs
handling
to
the
stay
door.
exactly in the same spot.
But if it's like you're doing a view from like a rooftop or something, you do want to handle like the parallax. Um, as like as you're walking to the left and right, you want that.
Mhm.
And so I thought really all you need is the location data of wherever your camera is, and you ignore the rotation. I don't know. I'm just bouncing this off you because this is like as far as my thoughts have kind of gone. I don't know if you.
I think that's interesting. But I don't think so. I think you need both because, for
Okay.
example, if you brought your camera, closer to the ground, and you're still looking at the projection, and then you tilt your camera up, you should be seeing the ceiling of the hallway in the projection, right?
Yeah.
But if you're only taking the location, you'd still be seeing it from the same perspective that you started with, right? So you wouldn't see the ceiling in the same way as you would, from the other side of the room. So I still think you need that rotation data to be able to um, see different parts of the room, right? Depending on where you're looking. Does that make
Got
sense?
gotcha. Um, yeah, a little bit. Um, I still think if the camera moved down, then the perspective would shift in the projection, and so you would just be tilting up, looking at a higher place in the projection, where you would be seeing, you'd still see the ceiling because of that higher. I
Hmm.
don't know. This is one of those things where I feel like just you'd have to do all the tests and stuff.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah. No. Absolutely. I'm curious as
um,
well.
but I know I am very excited. Yeah, but that's where I was like, this would only work for like distant cities or something. There'd have to be separation because the moment you wanted like a digital floor to just seamlessly line up with the real floor, that's where you need that corner pin, like that normalization of the projection so they could all kind of line up. And that's where I got. So how did you do that? How did you like normalize the render so that it would project onto the board like with the right perspective?
Well, that's just like projection mapping 101. Like I'm guessing you probably haven't done projection mapping, like
Mm-mm.
projecting onto objects. So like there's just some really easy free tools out there that just sort of like you set up your projector, you hook it up to your laptop, and then on the projector it displays like this cursor, and you just sort of like click the corners of the object,
Really?
and it automatically fixes the perspective of your projection.
That's so right now what I've been doing is I've just been setting up the EV viewport as like a pop out viewport, and I slide it over to the projector or something. And I was like,
Mhm.
I don't know what tools in EV I was trying to use like refractive materials and stuff to like try to normalize it, and it was ridiculous. So can you actually like drop that over as like just another pass, like a projection mapping pass on top of the EV viewport and like normalize it all live? I didn't think you could
Um,
do it live.
I mean, you can do it live, but the way that I do it is I capture the viewport, like with a screen capture, like a live stream capture, and then bring it into the Touch Designer, like the projection mapping software. And then
Oh,
when it sends it out through the projector from Touch Designer, it'll just correct it.
cool.
Yeah.
You would need, are you also somehow like streaming the 3D location of like the corners of the panel so that they can be like normalized? How do you tell it to deperspectify that
Well, I mean, like the only thing that like the perspective is only changing once it's projected on, right? So everything that's projected on it needs the same perspective distortion correction on it,
yeah.
right? The only location and rotation that you need is from your camera. So you need to know where to render the scene from. And as long as like the scene in Eevee is the same size as your projection, it should all just line up.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. Cool. I am very excited to see this video.
Um, I'll have to make the one that where I was doing the projection on a little screen back here. I've learned a lot since I did that, and one of those things is using metric units in Blender instead of Blender units. And so like scale is hugely important when you're working with virtual production and like
Oh yeah.
projection and stuff like that. And so the video I'm going to send you, it has a really interesting effect of like looking down a hallway, but the scale in Blender was way off. So like if I were to correct that scale, the effect would be like much more interesting. I mean, the video is still cool, but I definitely want to do more tests where like I measure what I'm projecting on and make sure, you know, the hallway is actually that big, right? Yeah. But no, it's some pretty cool stuff.
That's very cool stuff. I'm I'm excited. Man, I miss shooting stuff.
Pardon
This
me?
quarantine has been lame.
You miss shooting stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Haven't done a proper shoot in I don't even remember a year or something.
Wow.
It's been,
So I was wondering, like, is it like a cooperative kind of that you're running? Like, do people like live there temporarily while you're working with them, or?
that was kind of the hope. It's like, oh, we'll move out in the woods and we'll all just hang out and make movies and all have guest rooms and people can like live here and
Yeah.
we'll work on stuff. Um, it's kind of like there's three of us. My friend Sean lives in a house across the yard, and I live with Caitlin here. And people do come and stay, but usually it's like after they've gone through a divorce or something, and they're just like really sad and they need something. We've had a lot of divorced people come and stay here. Actually, it's kind of weird. But it's rarely infused with like a potent creative energy. But we do like different shoots here, and it's really fun. We've met other people out here on the peninsula, like especially young folks who are making films, and it's nice to be able to have like a space where you can be like, yeah, come, try not to trash it too much. Yeah, let's do a thing. And so it has worked like that. But the plan I had, it's a plan I think a lot of people had when they're like graduating high school. They're like, and I just want to create my like little film commune thing. And yeah, it turns out that like by the time I'm 32 now, and so everybody has kids and jobs and things like that, and so like that hey, let's just stay up till 4 a.m. and record our album, like energy is a little bit dissipated. I always wondered when I was like 18, 20, whatever, there were these like older people like in their 40s who were like, hey, oh, what you're doing is cool. Let me give you a bunch of like resources. I want to help you out. And I'm like, why are you helping me out? Don't you have like a bunch of other kind of stuff to do? And now I'm seeing all these like crazy teenagers with that like creative energy just trying to do stuff. And I'm like, I want to give you you have everybody my age has gotten married and careers and things like that. And so it's like, I ideally, yeah, I have a couple friends that still kind of have that, are still like, hey, yeah, let's make movies. But the problem is, if you were actually serious about wanting to do that, you move to LA. There isn't really a great film industry in Seattle. And so what you have, that's the threshold. And if you're below that threshold of like actually caring enough to move to LA, you just give up and like get another like real job, at some point. Um, and so that's something I'm kind of trying to figure out. But it is nice. I do have like guest rooms and stuff, and I have like Nathan Begdahl. I think is going to be staying here for a while. He made or he designed Rigify in Blender. He's great. He's just a really smart guy too, and so it's nice to have that flexibility. But yeah, haven't done the dream yet of like, let's just build stuff and go nuts for a couple of weeks, but it could happen.
Yeah. No, that's definitely my dream too. I mean, I want to buy
It's
my
a good
parents'
one.
farm when they retire and just like make shit. And I'm only an hour and a half from Toronto, so like, it's the same dream. Um,
Does
yeah.
Toronto have sort of a film thing going on?
Um, you would not believe how much is filmed in Toronto and not directly filmed in Toronto. Like they'll film like every episode of Suits in Toronto, but it actually takes place in New York, but it's
I've
filmed in
heard that.
Toronto. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's tons of stuff. Like I used to live downtown and The Handmaid's Tale used to be filming there all the time. So I'd be like sitting on my balcony and watching The Handmaid's Tale get made, But that doesn't take place in Canada either.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, like there is like a big like industry of filmmaking in Toronto, but it never actually happens in Toronto.
Okay. There was I saw Edgar Wright's tweet like a month ago where he was like proud to be one of the few people who filmed Toronto for Toronto. For he did Scott Pilgrim, yeah?
I don't know. But
Oh,
no, good
okay.
for him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's like, it actually takes place in Toronto. I was like,
Hmm.
oh, I didn't know this was a thing. I'd love to swing by Toronto at some point. I'm so stir crazy. I'm so excited to just like do a road trip or something. How's stuff going up in Canada? It's a nightmare down here.
Yeah, I've heard that. My best friend and I have like a partner, like an art partner. We do all of our projects together. He had to move back to Connecticut. Like we both left Toronto, and
Oh
he
yeah.
went to his parents in Connecticut, and I went to my parents in, you know, over here. Um, where was I going with this? Oh yeah, things are not as bad here as it is there, and on all
That's very
accounts.
nice.
Yeah, and especially in like the rural communities. I mean, like where I live, we've had 0 cases for like 3 months now.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
Cool.
but there's also like 200 of us, so
Well, that's very cool. Also, I'm glad you have a collaborator. That is awesome.
yeah, I miss them. I miss them a lot. We were supposed to be doing this together, and now we're separated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a collaborator, but then he became a bartender.
Yeah, I know.
From when we were like 18 until like 23, we were doing all of this stuff, and I was like, oh, this is it. We could move to LA. We could do all of this, and he's like, I'm a bartender. I was like, it's too late. The formative times were finding the collaborator. Like I have all these friends who kind of do film stuff, and like all of the ones who've done really well all kind of have like that. You need two brains. I think
Yeah, for
there's
sure.
the amount you get from like being able to see everything from it's binocular vision from a second perspective, and then like the thing you see in the middle is like always going to be stronger than just one person being like, I like this thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
for sure. I mean, I'm really big on like the technical side and like building things and like making things work. And he's really good at sort of like contextualizing it all and like coming up with an idea and like, making art out of it. Like as much as I can set up a green screen and track a camera, I don't know how to make a film. So
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, I was working on Prospect. Did you ever see Prospect?
no, what's that?
It's an indie film that was made here in Seattle. It's the only thing that was made here that I'm actually like stoked about. It's they're very low budget, but they like use the budget to the best way I've ever seen. They rented a warehouse, got a CNC machine, and basically just hired like 15 artists to work in that warehouse for 9 months and just build every single part of the film. They designed their own languages, their own fonts. They designed all of their sets in CAD and just like machined it out and like put it all together. It was absolutely ridiculous. Like when I joined up, they sent me their own custom fonts and they were like, use this font in this case, use this font for this for that. I was the visual effects supervisor on it, and so it's like they did most of it practically, except that when they're out, like 2/3 of the film takes place on an alien planet that has like dust floating in the air. So I had to track like 3,000 dust shots. Talk
Oh,
about a time when having motion data would have been useful.
yeah.
Um, so much point tracking, but yeah, it's just about to come to Netflix.
I
But
was just gonna say, where can I watch it?
it's it was Hulu. Yeah, it's coming. It's coming to Netflix on I think November 3rd. They're trying to figure out how they want to. That's like the day before the election, so they're trying to figure out how to like. Should we just wait for on advertising until post that chaos? But why was I talking about that? Oh yeah, but they had two people where and like you can just see it in their writing. Like one of them's kind of the character person, the other one's kind of like the technical person who like handles all like the spaceship logistics and all of that. And they're able to make these really rich like stories from like both a technical and personal standpoint because of that. And like the same on set, there's one that's always kind of thinking about like the larger context, and there's the other one that's like actually like talking, directing the actors usually.
Yeah.
Um, and it was so yeah, it was so cool to see. Yeah, you should check it out if you can. um I ended up with a bunch of the props from the movie. Like here's the key to the spaceship, which is made out of
Cool.
like actual pewter. I don't know how well that comes across, but it's like they designed just everything from scratch. They have a this time this girl eats a chocolate bar, and they made not just the label, but they designed a little mascot uh, for the chocolate bar, which they hid in like other things. When you open the chocolate bar, it's like embossed. It's like a custom chocolate bar with like a print on it. So they made a mold, and inside is like caramel. It was like
That's so much.
it was like the dream. It was just you go to the warehouse and it's full of concept art and just like you go, oh, this is it. This is the thing that like
Yeah, that's really cool. How do you get funding for something like that? Oh my God.
it was. They did it the hard way. Basically, they made a big bulletproof pitch. They made a ton of concept art. They had this book that kind of like they aged it and weathered it so it existed like in world. Um, but they came up with their entire shoot schedule. They came up with every single budget. They came up with like everything. They had actors like on deck who were like ready to like sign on and do all of that. So basically, they just kept going around everywhere, being like, "Look, we have figured out everything. You just have to like stamp it and give us the money." But that still took like 6 years of, and like the final thing they had to do like just the communication with the production company to kind of show like, look, this is what we're doing with your money, ended up being like as big of a project as like actually making the movie.
Mhm.
The logistics side is absolutely bonkers. They're excited now just because like now that they've paid their dues, there's a little bit more flexibility. So they're working on their next one. But yeah, that was a cool project. One thing I did, like they sent me some sketches so that I could design a 3D model of a like a landing pod, just so that they could send it to a miniature builder, so that he could build a 5-foot version of that same pod. And then we took that out to the woods and like filmed it with like in natural like bounce lighting with like branches waving on the top in the sunbeams and stuff, and cut that out and just stuck that into the plate, and so everything's like actually practical. Um, and so it was just stuff like that where it's like, wow, this is the coolest way to be doing this.
Yeah, that's really
Um,
cool.
I think I'm going to be posting a behind the scenes of that. They want me to post a couple behind the scenes for the Netflix release, which is exciting.
Yeah, that is exciting.
Distribution of stuff these days is absolutely bonkers. Like they did the whole festival circuit, and it's like basically you sell the rights of your film to like Hulu for like 5 months or something, and then if you fight really hard, you get them back, and you can do like the next stage, which is like, now we're going to be on this other streaming platform, now we're going to be Blu-ray, now we're going to be like Netflix. And so the film came out like 2 years ago, but this is the official like Netflix release, and
Wow.
it's just apparently like they're not even involved in that anymore. It's this, they sold it to this other company that's just going through, but it's not the standard thing that like we grew up thinking, where it's like, yeah, you take it to the Sundance Film Festival, some Sony buys it and distributes it. It's a very multi-staging thing.
Yeah, that sounds kind of strange. I hope they're still making money from it.
I don't know. I don't think so. I think it was more of a, like, a lot of people got paid, but I think like for them it was just kind of like the opportunity, like, we have our first film. So I think I'm just babbling now. I just get excited talking about Prospect.
Yeah, I'm excited to see it. It looks good. I just looked it up on IMDb, and like all of the artwork looks really cool. I'm gonna watch the trailer in a minute.
Like you can see that they had running around in the woods type budget. And so that's effectively what the movie is. But they just made sure that everything that like was people are wearing, like all of the outfits. In fact, let me see. Oh, I don't know if my Wi-Fi will go all the way that far. I just got most of the costumes from that movie.
Oh yeah.
And they're just filling up the whole back room. Yeah, they again, Seattle rent is so high they didn't have room to store it. And so they just came over with a moving truck and digging through all of like there's one bin that's just full of like control manuals and things for the different spaceships and the guns and stuff that they made, like a fake like in-world control user manuals.
Oh my god.
Or it's just so good.
I love that. Oh yeah, the artwork looks great for this. I can see all your dust everywhere.
I hate it just because it's like all I see are the mistakes. Our brains are so good at like seeing parallax that like if it isn't spot on, it sticks out like a sore thumb. Most people apparently haven't been too negatively distracted.
Okay. All right. Well, I gotta let you go. I'm actually gonna go pick up my car, which is exciting. Ooh. I've been in the middle of nowhere for 6 months without a car, and now I finally. Yeah. Well, I've lived in Toronto for the past 3 years, so I hadn't needed one, right?
Yeah.
So maybe I'll finally get a little bit of freedom. It'd be nice.
That would be very nice. Yeah, I can't imagine not having a car during quarantine. Yeah. Well, good luck and good talking. I'm excited to see those videos, those tests.
Yeah, for sure. And I'd love to chat again.
Sweet. No, that sounds awesome. All right, man.
Thank you very much for doing this.
I will talk soon.
Yeah. Bye.